Okay, hi students. Today we're going to be discussing poetry and specifically some of the skills that you can acquire in order to start to unpack poetry just in a formal sense. So that's not really dealing with any of the subject matter. That's actually dealing just with the way the poetry is arranged on the page. And what it's called is scanning poetry. If you guys will just refer to your first handout, the one that I passed out that has heroic couplets, free verse, and blank verse written on it. These are basically three ways that poets, over the years have organized their poetry. We have heroic couplets, which are two couplets, which are a couplet is two lines and they rhyme, so it's A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, so on and so forth. Heroic couplets are generally associated with more classical poets. They kind of demonstrate that you have a command over the English language in the sense that you can rhyme at will. So it's kind of a more elevated form. Poets started to resort back to this form in the neoclassical era to emulate classic poets. The next one is free verse. Free verse is basically, I guess I should back up because, no, free verse is, it's hard. Free verse is when there's no meter or no rhyme. Blank verse is iambic pentameter, which is 10 beats, five syllables basically. And yeah, so next I'm going to teach you guys about the different kinds of rhythm in poetry. If you've noticed, I've split the lines up here with lines. If you see the lines right here, these are each called feet. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 feet. That's called pentameter. And there's 5 feet. If there were 3 feet, it would be tetrameter, so on and so forth. So there's 5 feet, and within the feet there are 2 syllables. So oft I had heard of blue sea gray. This is one of the first things that you need to look for when you're looking at poetry. Oftentimes poets will do certain things with this to get a certain point across, and oftentimes the way that a line scans, like which syllables are stressed and which syllables are unstressed, will help you determine whether it's a heroic couplet, whether it's free verse, whether it's blank verse. Blank verse is always going to be pentameter, which means it's always going to have 5 feet with 10 syllables. Always, 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 always. Now, that's pentameter. Iambic pentameter, which is what this last one is in, and what the poet Milton, who wrote this particular excerpt, this is from a poem called Paradise Lost, Book 9. It's a very famous poem. Milton always wrote in iambic pentameter, so 5 feet with an unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed meter. Meter is one of the hardest things to get the hang of when you're scanning poetry because it's really subjective. But once you get the hang of it, it's easy. But basically you say, oft I had heard of blue sea gray. Notice how I heard blue sea gray. They're stressed. Iambic pentameter was adopted because the poets believed it mimicked our natural speech patterns. So they tried to start writing in iambic pentameter. And then this is 3/4 of poetry, iambic pentameter. Especially poets that wrote before 1945. Neoclassical romantic poets, a lot of them used iambic pentameter. Whether or not it was rhymed or not depended, but the only difference between this right here, the heroic couplets, and the blank verse is that blank verse is unrhymed. They're both iambic pentameter, blank verse is unrhymed. If you notice right here, each one is rhymed. Free verse is poetry that has no meter and no rhyme scheme. So although a couple lines may have pentameter, which is 5 feet, 10 syllables, the next line might have 8. The next line might have 6, the next line might have 10. There's no form to free verse. Poets like Walt Whitman adopted free verse because they were trying to be innovative, they were trying to be new. They thought that poetry should mirror everyday life. They thought that poetry should deal with everyday subject matter. So they thought that if that was the case, they should also write in a way that mirrored everyday subject matter, which was not stuffy, it was not, I guess, arrogant. So therefore, they didn't use these very constrictive rhythms. These are very uncommon right here. Anapestic is usually used for comedies, but anapestic is 2 unstressed syllables followed by a stressed, followed by 2 unstressed, followed by a stressed, so on, so forth. Trochaic is stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Dactylic is stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed. So if you see dactylic and anapestic are just kind of the opposite of each other, and iambic and trochaic are kind of the opposite of each other. But these are some of the things that we look for when we start reading poetry. How many feet does it have? How many syllables does that line have? And where are the stresses in that line? So if you guys turn to the other page that I gave you, that I told you not to turn over, you can go ahead and turn it over. And all I want you to do is to label all 3, either heroic, couplet, free verse, or blank verse. And like I said, free verse, there's no rhyme scheme, there's no meter that repeats. Rhyming couplets are kind of easy because you can look for the rhyme. Blank verse is always going to be an iambic, which is 5 feet, pentameter, which is unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. So you can just label those. And if you guys want extra credit, you can try and scan. And by scan, I mean break the first line of each one of those stanzas into feet. And a foot is just 2 syllables. So oft I had heard of Lou C. Gray. That's a foot. So if you guys want to try and break the first line of each one of those into this and scan it, that would be cool too. Oh, Andrew, did I not give you a sheet?
It's okay.
No, it's not okay.
You are an awful classmate.
And also, after you're done, if you guys have time, the first stanza I gave you right here that's listed as a heroic couplet, that's one of my favorite poems. I think it's one of the most beautiful poems written in the English language.
Who's it by?
It's called Adam's Curse. It's by Yeats. It's really good. Just read it when you're done. Yes, Laurel?
Which one are you referring to?
The one under heroic couplet on the sheet that I gave you that was labeled. It's really pretty. Does anybody think that they know what the first one is?
I'm going to go.
That would be The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, 1922.
Okay, Laurel, no one likes a know-it-all. No, I'm just kidding. No, that is in fact The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. That's an interesting poem, although this section is written in free verse with no common meter or no rhyme scheme. T.S. Eliot would actually insert instances of blank verse, actually even instances of sonnets into his poem. This is an epic poem, which is a whole other lesson, but yes, that is the first one. Can someone tell me the second one? Yes. Yes, or heroic. That's actually the other. That is the correct term for it as well. It's either a rhyming or heroic couplet. This is actually another stanza from the same poem that I told you guys I liked a lot. So, by process of elimination. Very good. Yes, Andrew.
I was like, you're done.
Oh, yeah, I'm done.
And